This video is brought to you by Skillshare. If you were to sum up France in one word since the second round of its snap legislative election last week, ungovernable might be the best choice. The surprise election delivered an even more surprising result. Marine Le Pen's far-right National Rally, which polls indicated was on the brink of coming to power, gained a considerable number of seats, but came third. President Macron's centrist Ensemble alliance lost many seats and fell to second place, while the hastily crafted pan-left-wing New Popular Front alliance came first with the most seats, but far from a majority. The election has left France's National Assembly split into three ideologically divided blocs with no clear governing majority. So in this video, we're going to have a look at some of the potential government formations, go through their pros and cons, and explain why France now faces a tense political gridlock with no clear way out. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. Let's start with what might, at face value, seem like the most obvious option for a new government, the New Popular Front, or NFP. Having emerged from the election as the largest grouping in the National Assembly, the NFP has claimed that it must be them that's given the chance to govern. For example, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who leads the far-left France Unbowed party, the NFP's largest party, said that President Macron has the duty to call on the New Popular Front to govern by appointing one of their ranks to be Prime Minister. And Communist Party leader Fabien Roussel said Macron should respect the choice of the voters by letting the NFP govern. Now, at the time of writing, the NFP still hasn't come to a consensus on which left-wing figure they want to be Prime Minister. The NFP, which ranges from far left to centre left, is largely made up of four main parties: France Unbowed, the Communist Party, the Greens and the Socialists. So there are some pretty strong differences of opinion within the alliance. But even if and when the NFP's members agree on their prime ministerial nominee, there are a number of reasons why they're unlikely to govern. For starters, Macron is under no obligation to let the NFP govern, and by no means has to appoint their choice as Prime Minister. After all, the NFP may have won the most seats, but it was far from winning a majority either by seat or vote share. And even if Macron did appoint an NFP Prime Minister, it would have a very short lifespan, because they would be leading a minority government that could be instantly taken down by a censure vote, which would likely be supported by almost all the rest of the National Assembly, as the parties from the centre to the far right are staunchly opposed to the idea of a government involving Mélenchon's France Unbowed. So let's rule out an NFP minority government. Another possibility is some sort of so-called moderate coalition that might be able to eke out, or at least get close to, a parliamentary majority. This hypothetical government could involve parties on the centre-left, like the Socialists and perhaps the Greens, the centre, so Macron's own alliance, and centre-right to right parties, like the Republicans. Macron himself seems to favour a moderate coalition. Writing in a letter to the French people, he called for dialogue and the building of a majority between all parties that, quote, identify with Republican institutions, rule of law, parliamentarianism, a pro-European stance, and French independence, which is his way of saying anyone but National Rally and France Unbowed. Unfortunately for Macron, this is easier said than done, as there are a number of potential roadblocks. First, it would rely on splitting the New Popular Front, which has so far seemed intent on sticking together since the election, and it would create something of an awkward alliance as the centre-left, as part of the NFP, campaigned on a platform committed to reversing Macron's landmark reforms. Plus, senior Republican figures don't seem keen on such an idea either. So let's move on to another possible option, a centre-rightish minority government featuring Macron's alliance and the Conservative Republicans. Now, this actually seems like quite a natural fit, given the fact that, out of all opposition parties, the Republicans have been the most supportive of Macron's legislative agenda over the past couple of years. On top of this, a number of senior figures from Macron's political camp, like former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe, have expressed support for such an arrangement. Now, it's worth pointing out that the Republicans' parliamentary leader has said that the party will not join any government coalition, but he did leave the door open to some form of legislative pact. However, a government based on a Macronist Republican pact would still be a minority one, and could easily be brought down by a censure vote, something that the NFP would naturally vote for, and Le Pen's National Rally has signalled it would support too. Adding to all this political chaos is the fact that Macron's own alliance is effectively on the brink of splintering. His allies, including Prime Minister Gabriel Attal, who remains in post as an interim, are clearly unhappy with Macron's decision to dissolve the National Assembly and call the snap election, seeing it as an unforced error. Additionally, while some of Macron's allies like Edouard Philippe and Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin want to look to the right, i.e. the Republicans, for parliamentary support, the more centre or centre-left members of the Macronist camp would much prefer a broader coalition involving the centre-left. In fact, several ministers and deputies reportedly plan to quit Macron's Renaissance Party if it strikes a deal exclusively with the Republicans. So, what now? Well, Emmanuel Macron is seemingly taking a fairly hands-off approach, saying he will give some time to the political forces to build compromises, and in the meantime, Gabriel Attal will remain interim Prime Minister. But naming a new Prime Minister and government will be just the first challenge. The Constitution prevents the President from calling a legislative election within a year of the last one, so trying to break the political deadlock with an election just isn't an option for now. So one future scenario could see a kind of zombie minority government struggle through the next year, with tacit approval from enough other parties to not bring it down, but struggling to push ahead with any legislation. Alternatively, if no political consensus is reached, any new government could be brought down by a censure vote, as could its replacement, and so on, leading to a series of short-lived governments until a new election can be called. One final option is for Macron to appoint a prime minister that's above party politics, someone you might describe as a technocrat. This idea was endorsed by the Republican Senate leader, who said Macron should appoint a personality above clans and currents, a calming personality, and incontestable by their competence, their experience, their sense of the state, and the general interest. But who that person is, or if they even exist, remains to be seen.
Running a profitable online news brand that gives away free content is a little tricky. So recently we launched an online store where you can purchase copies of our magazine, Too Long. The thing is, setting up an e-commerce business is also pretty tricky. But fortunately, when it comes to websites and e-commerce, Skillshare is there to help, with me taking their very useful course, Shopify Essentials for Web Developers, when setting up the store. That's because Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. That means that Skillshare can help take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. There's hundreds of career-focused classes. That's courses from how to start a business to maximizing your workflow or digital marketing. The best news is that the first 500 people to use our link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial to Skillshare. So get started today.